Evelyn, why is there blood beneath your wedding dress?
Lock the door. My father did this, and if he learns I told you, we're both dead.
The first thing my wife gave me on our wedding night was not a kiss. It was a warning. There was blood beneath the back of her wedding dress, and when I asked who had hurt her, she locked both hands around my wrist and whispered, "My father did this. If he finds out I told you, neither of us will survive the week." My name is Adrian Cole, and until that night, I believed I had married Evelyn Vale for money. I was 34 years old, buried beneath the debt of a construction company my late father had left me, and desperate enough to accept a business arrangement disguised as a marriage. Evelyn was the only daughter of Conrad Vale, one of the most powerful real estate developers in Illinois. His company owned hotels, apartment towers, shopping centers, and enough politicians to make trouble disappear. People in Chicago spoke about Conrad with admiration in public and fear in private. They spoke about Evelyn with cruelty everywhere. They called her the Vale family's ugly daughter. They laughed at the pale scar that crossed the left side of her face from her temple to the edge of her jaw. Gossip sites used photographs taken from her worst angles. At charity dinners, strangers whispered that Conrad would need to buy a husband for her. Then he did. 3 months before our wedding, Conrad invited me to the top floor of Vale Tower. He knew my company was 6 weeks from collapse. He placed a folder on his desk and said he would clear every debt, restore my father's business, and award us contracts worth $40 million. There was only one condition. I had to marry Evelyn and remain married to her for at least 3 years. I hated him for offering. I hated myself more for listening. But 200 employees depended on my company. Many had worked for my father for decades. If Cole Construction failed, they would lose their jobs, their health insurance, and pensions they had spent their lives earning. So I told myself I was saving them. That was the respectable version of the truth. The uglier truth was that I was afraid of becoming poor, powerless, and forgotten. I signed Conrad's agreement. I met Evelyn the next afternoon at a quiet restaurant near Lake Michigan. She wore a high collar, even though it was warm, and kept her scar turned away from the room. "My father explained the arrangement," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was nothing weak about it. "He did, and you accepted." "Wes." She studied me for a long moment. "Then I have one request. Never pretend this is love. I can survive a business arrangement. I cannot survive another lie." I promised her honesty. It was the first promise I made to my wife, and I broke it before dessert. I told her I was marrying her only to protect my employees. I did not admit how much I wanted the money, or how relieved I felt knowing Conrad could rescue me. Our wedding took place at the Vale estate north of the city. 400 guests filled a ballroom covered in white roses and crystal lights. Senators shook Conrad's hand. Executives praised his generosity. Photographers competed for the best image of Evelyn's scar. When she walked down the aisle, I expected to feel shame. Instead, I felt angry, not at her. At the people watching her. They smiled as if they were attending an expensive joke. One woman in the front row leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "At least the groom is handsome." Conrad got his mullen, heard it too. Her steps never slowed. She reached me, raised her chin, and looked directly into my eyes. For the first time, I noticed that the scar was not the most memorable thing about her face. Her eyes were gray, calm, and exhausted. They belonged to someone who had learned to remain still while the world tried to wound her. During the reception, Conrad kept one hand on my shoulder, as if I were another property he had purchased. "Smile," he ordered. "Tomorrow the contracts will be released." Evelyn stood beside us without speaking. When the music began, I placed my hand at her waist. She immediately flinched. "Did I hurt you?" I asked. "No." The answer came too quickly. We danced for less than a minute before she became pale. Conrad stepped forward, smiling for the cameras, and tightened his fingers around her upper arm. "Stand straight," he murmured. Evelyn's face changed. It was not embarrassment, it was terror. That should have been the moment I understood. Instead, I allowed Conrad to lead her away, because I was still thinking about contracts, payroll, and the future he had promised me. Hours later, Evelyn and I entered the bridal suite on the 3rd floor of the estate. She locked the door, then checked it twice. Her hands shook as she removed her earrings. I poured 2 glasses of water and told her she could sleep alone. I said I would take the sofa. She stared at me as if kindness were a language she did not recognize. Then she took 1 step and collapsed. I caught her before she struck the floor. That was when I saw the dark stain hidden beneath the layered fabric at the back of her dress. I wanted to call an ambulance. She begged me not to. The estate doctor works for him, she whispered. The security team works for him. Everyone here works for him. I asked again who had hurt her. Her answer changed my life. My father did this. I helped her into the bathroom and turned away while she changed. She had a deep cut along her lower back. It looked as though she had fallen against something sharp. How? He pushed me into the edge of his desk before the ceremony. Why? Because I refused to sign another document. I felt cold. What document? She opened the bathroom cabinet and removed a small sewing kit. Hidden inside it was a flash drive. This is why he wanted me married, she said. Not because he cares whether I have a husband. He needs someone outside the family to blame. When his company collapses, I stared at the drive. Evelyn explained that her mother, Margaret, had founded the original company 29 years earlier. Conrad joined after their marriage and slowly took control. When Margaret died in a boating accident 12 years ago, her shares went into a trust for Evelyn. On Evelyn's 31st birthday, she would receive voting control of Vale Holdings. That birthday was 9 days away. Conrad had spent years moving money through false construction projects, shell companies, and private accounts. Evelyn had discovered part of the scheme while reviewing trust records. The marriage agreement was designed to place me on several corporate boards. Conrad planned to authorize illegal transfers using my electronic signature, then expose the fraud after Evelyn's birthday. I would go to prison. Evelyn would be declared mentally unfit. Conrad would take back control of the trust. Why marry me? I asked. Because you were desperate, she said. Because your company already had financial problems. And because your father once accused Conrad of using unsafe materials. If everything fell apart, people would believe you were taking revenge. My father had died in a highway accident 2 years earlier. He had argued with Conrad shortly before his death, but I had never known why. Evelyn watched my face. There's more, she said. The flash drive contained emails, payment records, voice recordings, and scanned inspection reports. According to one report, Vale contractors had used defective steel in a parking structure my father was hired to repair. He refused to sign the safety approval. 3 days later, his truck lost control on a dry, empty road. The police ruled it an accident caused by brake failure. My hands began to tremble. Are you saying Conrad killed my father? I'm saying my father paid the mechanic who serviced your father's truck. The payment was hidden through a consulting company. I haven't found proof of what the mechanic did. I looked toward the locked bedroom door. On the other side, music still played below us. Hundreds of people were drinking champagne in honor of the man who might have murdered my father. Why didn't you go to the police? I tried. 3 years earlier, Evelyn had contacted a detective. Conrad learned about it within a day. The detective retired suddenly. Evelyn was sent to a private treatment center in Wisconsin and kept there for 6 months. Conrad told the world she had suffered a breakdown. The scar, I asked quietly. Her fingers touched her cheek. I got it the night I tried to leave. I did not ask for more. For the first time in my life, I understood that silence could be an act of mercy. I cleaned the wound and covered it with a bandage from the hotel kit. Then I copied the flash drive onto my laptop. I expected files. What I found was a map of ruined lives, tenants forced from buildings that were deliberately neglected, inspectors bribed to approve dangerous structures, employees fired after reporting fraud, a city councilman paid through a fake charity, and in a folder labeled MC, photographs of Evelyn's mother meeting privately with an attorney just days before her death. There was also an audio recording. Margaret's voice filled the room. If anything happens to me, Conrad is responsible. The original trust document is not in the family vault. Evelyn knows the place where I taught her to be brave. The recording ended. Evelyn looked confused. I've heard that line 100 times. I asked where her mother had taken her as a child. Everywhere. Museums, libraries, the lake. Where did she teach you to be brave? Evelyn went still. Then she whispered, the theater. Her mother had loved old movies. When Evelyn was 9, she froze during a school play and ran backstage crying. Margaret brought her to the abandoned Orpheum Theater, which the family owned, and made her stand alone on the stage. She told me courage wasn't the absence of fear. Evelyn said, it was deciding that fear didn't get the final word. The Orpheum had been closed for 15 years. We decided to leave the estate before sunrise. At 3 in the morning, someone tested the bedroom door. Once, then twice. Evelyn turned white. A man's voice came through the wood. Mrs. Cole, your father asked me to collect the document. I placed the flash drive inside my shoe and opened the door with the security chain still attached. Conrad's personal assistant Miles Danner stood in the hall with 2 guards. My wife is sleeping, I said. Mr. Vale needs her signature. Then he can ask tomorrow. Miles smiled. You should remember who paid for tonight. And you should remember whose room you're trying to enter. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Miles stepped back. Tomorrow, Mr. Cole. His tone made it sound like a threat. At dawn, Evelyn and I left through the kitchen. I drove us to a private clinic operated by a college friend, Dr. Lena treated Evelyn's injury, photographed it with her permission, and documented signs of older abuse. Then she asked whether Evelyn wanted the police. Evelyn looked at me. I said, this is your decision. She called them. 2 officers took her statement. They were polite, but I recognized doubt in their faces when Conrad's name came up. Before they left, one received a phone call. His entire manner changed. A detective will follow up, he said. By noon, 3 Vale contracts with my company had been canceled. Our bank froze a line of credit. A local news site published a story accusing me of manipulating an emotionally unstable heiress. Conrad called me at 12:17. Bring my daughter home, he said. She is my wife. She is an asset you were hired to manage. I recorded every word. Did you push her into your desk? Silence. Then he laughed. You have no idea what kind of woman you married. I'm beginning to understand exactly what kind of man she survived. His voice turned flat. You have until 6. At 2 o'clock, state regulators arrived at Cole Construction with a search warrant. Someone had reported that we were storing stolen materials. The accusation was false, but the search stopped all operations. Conrad was not waiting for 6. He was destroying me by the hour. Evelyn wanted to surrender. She said that if she returned, Conrad might leave my employees alone. I told her about the night my father taught me to play poker. I was 14 and afraid to lose $5. He said a powerful man's greatest advantage was not money. It was convincing everyone else that he could never be beaten. Conrad's attacking quickly because he's afraid. I said, we need to find out why. We drove to the Orpheum Theater. The building stood between 2 newer towers, its stone entrance covered by plywood. My company had repaired the roof years earlier, so I knew a service entrance in the alley. Inside, dust floated through the beam of my flashlight. Torn velvet curtains hung above the stage. Rows of empty seats faced us like silent witnesses. Evelyn walked to center stage. This is where she brought me. We searched for 2 hours, under seats, behind old posters, inside dressing room cabinets. Nothing. Then Evelyn repeated her mother's words, the place where I taught her to be brave. Not the building, the exact place. She stood on a faded brass star embedded in the stage floor. I knelt and found 2 tiny screw heads beneath years of dirt. Under the plate was a key and a note. Evelyn, truth needs a witness, but justice needs proof. Box 317, Lakeshore Union Bank. Love, Mom. We reached the bank 20 minutes before closing. The key opened a safe deposit box registered under Margaret's maiden name. Inside were the original trust, a handwritten ledger, a small video camera, and a sealed letter addressed to the United States Attorney. The trust contained a provision Conrad had hidden from Evelyn. If he was formally charged with a crime involving the company or Margaret's estate, every share he controlled would immediately transfer to an independent foundation. Evelyn would become interim chair. The ledger documented years of bribes, but the camera held the real weapon. Margaret had recorded Conrad in their home office. In the video, he admitted rerouting company money. He threatened to have her declared unstable if she went to authorities. Then, he said something that erased every doubt about my father. "Cole thinks he can block the garage approval," Conrad said. "He'll sign, or I'll arrange another mechanical failure." Margaret asked, "Like the elevator inspector?" Conrad smiled, "Exactly like him." It was not a direct confession to murder, but it connected Conrad's methods, threats, and payments. We needed to place the evidence beyond his reach. I called Naomi Price, a federal prosecutor my father had known through a civic board. I did not tell her everything by phone. I said I had evidence involving public corruption, interstate fraud, and possible homicide. She agreed to meet us at a federal building the next morning. We never made it there. That night, our car was struck at an intersection. A black SUV ran a red light and hit the passenger side. The impact spun us into a traffic signal. My airbag opened. Evelyn's window shattered. The SUV reversed and drove away. I woke to Evelyn calling my name. She had blood on her forehead, but she was conscious. I reached for my phone. It was gone. So was the envelope containing copies of Margaret's evidence. A man in a dark jacket was walking away from our damaged car. I tried to follow him, but my left leg collapsed. Sirens approached. The original evidence was still safe in the bank, but Conrad now knew we had found it. At the hospital, Miles Danner appeared before the police finished questioning us. He carried flowers. "Mr. Vale is deeply concerned," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "How did you know where we were?" Miles placed the flowers on a table. "Your father always knows where you are." I noticed a small black device clipped beneath the paper around the flowers. A microphone. I knocked the arrangement onto the floor and crushed the device under my shoe. For the first time, Miles lost his smile. "Tell Conrad," I said, "that we'll attend his foundation gala tomorrow night." Evelyn looked at me in shock. The gala was Conrad's most important annual event. 800 donors, reporters, judges, and politicians would gather inside the Grand Vale Hotel. Conrad planned to announce a billion-dollar riverfront project. It was the perfect place to expose him. It was also the place where he held the most power. After Miles left, I explained my plan. Conrad believed he could control courts, police, and newspapers one person at a time, so we would give him too many witnesses to control. Naomi arranged for federal agents to collect the original evidence from the bank. My attorney prepared an emergency petition using the real trust. Lena agreed to testify about Evelyn's injuries. My operations manager traced the false report against my company to a security contractor owned by Miles. Then Evelyn made one more discovery. The scar on her face had always been described as the result of a car accident. But old medical records listed injuries caused by broken glass inside the Vale home. Her mother's private calendar showed she had met a divorce attorney that same day. Evelyn finally remembered the argument. Conrad had thrown a glass at Margaret. It missed her and struck their daughter. He had built an entire public story around the wound he caused. The next evening, Evelyn entered the gala wearing a silver dress that left her scar uncovered. The room fell quiet. I walked beside her, still limping from the crash. Conrad stood on the stage beneath a giant screen. His smile remained perfect, but his eyes were full of murder. He opened his arms. "My daughter has been unwell," he told the crowd. "Thankfully, she has come home." Evelyn took the microphone from his hand. "No," she said. "I came to take it back." Conrad reached for her, but I stepped between them. The screen behind us changed. Margaret Vale appeared. Gasps moved across the ballroom. The video played. Guests heard Conrad threaten his wife. They heard him speak about mechanical failures. Then the screen displayed bank transfers, shell companies, inspection reports, and photographs of Evelyn's injuries. Conrad shouted for security. No one moved. The hotel's head of security had already received a federal warrant. Conrad turned to me. "You gave me a price," I said. She gave me the truth. He tried to leave through a side door. Federal agents entered first. For a moment, the most powerful man in Chicago looked small, not weak, not sorry, just shocked that the world had stopped obeying him. An agent placed him under arrest on charges related to wire fraud, bribery, obstruction, and conspiracy. More charges would come later. Miles was arrested in the hotel garage while attempting to destroy 2 phones. The driver of the SUV accepted a deal and admitted he had been paid to frighten us and recover the evidence. That confession connected Miles to the crash and Miles to Conrad. The investigation into my father's death reopened. 6 months later, the mechanic who serviced his truck confessed that Miles had paid him to damage the brake line. My father had not died because of bad luck. He had died because he refused to sign a lie. Conrad's trial lasted 7 weeks. He was convicted on multiple federal charges, including racketeering, fraud, bribery, witness intimidation, and conspiracy connected to my father's death. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. But Evelyn's revenge did not end with a sentence. Under the original trust, Conrad lost control of Vail Holdings the day he was formally charged. Evelyn became interim chair. Her first act was to remove every director who had protected him. Her second was to create the Margaret Vail Justice Fund using assets recovered from Conrad's private accounts. The fund paid legal costs for tenants, whistleblowers, and employees harmed by the company. Her third act was the most personal. She ordered the demolition of Vail Tower's top-floor office. The wood from Conrad's enormous desk was cut into benches for the restored Orpheum Theater. On opening night, Evelyn stood beneath the stage lights where her mother had once taught her to be brave. The scar on her face was visible. She did not hide it with makeup or turn away from cameras. She told the audience, "For years, people called me ugly because they were taught to see me through my father's eyes." This scar was never proof that I was broken. It was proof that I survived him. Everyone rose. I watched from the front row. By then, our 3-year marriage contract had been canceled. The fraudulent business agreement was void. My company survived through honest contracts, not veil favors. Every employee kept a job. Evelyn and I were free to walk away from each other. For several months, we did not discuss the future. We attended court hearings. We rebuilt companies. We learned how to sleep without checking the locks. Then, one quiet evening, we returned to the Orpheum. No reporters, no lawyers, no guards, only us. I told Evelyn the full truth I should have told her at our first lunch. I had married her for money. I had used my employees as an excuse, but fear and ambition had made the decision. How? Because I knew what desperation looked like. I saw it every time you looked at my father. I apologized. She asked if I wanted forgiveness. I said I wanted the chance to earn it. Evelyn took off her wedding ring and placed it in my hand. For one terrible second, I thought she was leaving. Then she said, "The first time, my father bought this marriage. If there is a second time, you have to ask me yourself." So I knelt on the same brass star where we had found her mother's key. I did not offer her money, protection, or promises of a perfect life. I offered the truth. "Evelyn, I married you because I was afraid to lose everything. I love you because you taught me what is worth keeping. Will you choose me now that no one can force you?" She looked down at me, crying and smiling. "Yes," she said, "but this time, we write our own vows." We married again in the restored theater with 80 guests instead of 800. My employees sat beside former Vail tenants. Lena stood with Evelyn. Naomi sat in the front row. An empty chair held a photograph of Margaret, and another held my father's old construction helmet. There were no gossip reporters. There was no business contract. There was no man standing behind us, deciding what our lives were worth. People once said I had married the ugliest daughter of a powerful family for money. They were wrong about almost everything. I had married a woman whose father taught the world to mistake cruelty for truth. On our wedding night, I saw the blood he tried to hide. In the months that followed, I saw her courage, her intelligence, and the beauty of a person who could survive hatred without becoming hateful. Conrad Vale believed money could purchase loyalty, silence, marriage, and innocence. In the end, his money bought him only a larger empire to lose. And the daughter he tried to break became the one person powerful enough to take it all away. Memorable ending, he gave her a scar and called it shame. She turned it into evidence, and signed his empire away with the hand he could never control.